In this video, we'll look at the basic ways of making a slip, double or single, regular or irregular. Templot has a make slip function in the tools menu, which very conveniently will make a regular slip from the starting point of either a turnout or a half diamond. You can use this function to make a slip to almost any geometry you wish, though for an irregular slip, you will have to do quite a bit of work on it to get the geometry that you want. When I'm making a slip, I nearly always start from a half diamond, but there is one situation in which it is very useful to be able to start from a turnout. And that is where the track layout all around the turnout in question is already designed and fixed, and you don't want to alter that at all, but you want to put a slip where that turnout is. Now, I've just generated a simple freelance layout here. It's not a straightforward parallel track. We've got a few points, and let's say we want to convert this point into a slip without disturbing the geometry or positions of any of the points and tracks around it. Let's say, for instance, we just wanted to start a new fan of sidings over on this side. So we'll start this video by just simply demonstrating making a slip from a turnout. First, we would bring the turnout you want to be the donor turnout, as it were, to the control, and I delete to the control to save cluttering up the storage box. And it couldn't be any simpler. You go into the tools menu, come down to make slip, come across and pick whichever one you want, double slip, and a single slip, and it gives you the option of which side you want the slip road to be. Let's make a double slip. You click on that and away she goes. At the end of it, Templot will ask you, is that the double slip that you wanted? It tells you that the crossing angle is 1 in 8.29, and that is the angle for all of the crossings, the 2V crossings and the K crossings on each half diamond that are the basis of the slip here. This is a regular slip, so all the angles are the same, and they're the same as the V angle of the donor turnout. It will also tell you the radius of the two slip roads, and you just need to check those against your defined minimum radius, and we're obviously fine here. So we would just say yes to that and continue. Now you can see that that has worked on a curve, and this is a constant curve. It's not a transitional curve, and it obviously works on a straight as well. You can use the make function on a transitional curve, but it will make a regular slip and will distort the exit roads from the geometry that you want. And you then have to do work to bring them back into line. But we will see how to do that later on in the video. Okay, so the basic making slip function for me starts with a half diamond. And we'll just do a simple one here for the moment. So we'll make the straight track a half diamond, and to do that, there's no quick key. We have to go into Template, insert half diamond, and it inserts it at one end. We ought to just check that it's the right geometry. It will be a regular diamond that it will select, and that's a K10 and a V10. So at that shallow angle, if you're being prototypical, that would have to be a switched diamond. So we'll just bring that down a little bit to make it a fixed or checked diamond. And it's all straight, so all regular. So the V crossing angle, let's bring it down to an 8. See, that's actually made it a bit curved. So we need to do the K angle as well. Real K crossing angle, exactly analogous. Now we're back to a regular diamond again. If you want to make a slip, an internal slip, then you need a diamond that is somewhere in the range of 1 in 7 to 1 in 8, or 1 in 6, 1 in 7, or 1 in 8 will make you a fixed diamond. Any more shallow than that, it needs to be switched. And any sharper than that, you will end up with radii in the slip roads that are too tight for the prototype. Models may get around it, but the prototype won't. Templot will still go on and make it for you, but it will tell you that it's getting tight. So now we come into the tools, make slip. What would you like, a single or a double, sir?
A single.
Single, okay. So it allows you to do it one hand or the other. I can never remember for a single slip which is the same hand and which is the opposite hand. So let's say same hand, and along she goes. And again, it says, is that what you wanted? Is that where you wanted it? And this is why it never imprints on my mind as to which is which, because you can cancel it and go back to where you were if you got the slip on the wrong side. And go back in. Start again, make it the opposite hand. Ah, that's what I meant. Okay. And just to give you something else to play with, it keeps the original half diamond template that it built the slip from as the control. So the slip function is very nice because it does it all for you. It sorts out the slip switches, it sorts out the slip road, it sorts out the check rails, it sorts out all the sleepering, it puts the sleepers where they should be, the right length. You don't have to do anything else. Wonderful. So that's very nice, but works very nicely for a straight track. Let's just put that down there. It works as well on the curve. There you are, there's your 5-foot radius curve. We'll put a diamond in there. So that's template, insert diamond, half diamond into plain track. You can see down here, it's a regular diamond. It always defaults to a regular diamond. So both the K angle in the middle and the V angle at the regular crossing here are both eights. So that being the case, Templot will create a slip from that. So if we come into tools, make slip, let's make it a double. And there you go. So because it's regular, because all the angles are the same, Templot can do it, even on a curve. It won't do it on a transition curve, but that wouldn't be prototypical anyway. It's just asking you, is this okay before it confirms it? It still gives you the option of going back to the half diamond again, because if you have got it wrong, it's a pain to have to delete each component in turn. And it will tell you that the crossing angles are 1 in 8, that the slip radii are 28.5 inches roughly, or 765 inches. And you can see that because it's curved, you've got a really shallow slip on one side and a much tighter one on the other, but still comfortably above the 2-foot absolute minimum radius for us.
Can I ask a question, Laurie?
Of course.
Just something I've observed. When you made the single slip, it retained the length of straight track that you'd drawn.
Yeah.
Whereas with the double slip, it's trimmed the track length back.
So it has. I hadn't noticed that.
Was that something you did, or was it just?
No. No. That's
because I was following along on my Templot, and it's done exactly the same for me as well.
No, that is a Templot feature. It hadn't occurred to me that that's what it did, but yes, you're right. Yes.
I wonder if it's because it was a curve rather than a straight.
Maybe. Should we try? Won't take long.
I wonder if you try and lengthen it again, what branch would it lengthen?
It would lengthen on the main track. But we
So
would have...
You could easily put it back to how it was.
Yes, you'd have to make one of these the control. Say that one. I'll delete it to the control. Keep its label. And if we just do length, it will lengthen the exit track, but not the branch track. And it will continue the geometry, i.e. the curve or straight, that was going through the slip.
Right. So you've not really lost anything by having that feature?
No. No. Let's just move that out of the way. Yes, it's a function of the single versus the double slip, isn't it? Retaining the original length.
What happens if you try and roam a double slip you've made?
It won't. Roaming is purely for points, for turnouts. Okay. So the half diamond here is the control template. If I now try and roam, it'll say, What you have to do instead of roam is come into the mouse action geometry suite of menus and come down to snake through peg. But if you think about it, you can't really roam along this side because the half diamond is a device. It's not a complete unit of track. You could never have that as an end piece of track. You have to complete it with a diamond on the other side. That's just your start for doing it. That's in a way a constructional device that Templot uses. And I guess the geometry of it, the mathematics of it, an awful lot easier to transfer between diamonds and points, because we can make that a point if we want to. We have to go into the template, convert half diamond to turnout, and it will do that again with the same V angle as the slip had.
I had a question about switches in slips.
Yeah.
What does Templot assume the switch in a slip is? Because I come from that funny world where my switches are all loose heel Great Western ones.
Right. Templot has its own slip switches, and it varies because it has a full stock rail and a chamfered switch rail on one side and just the running face of the switch rail on the other. I suspect that the angles of the chamfering are different to the standard REAs as well. When you're doing slips, particularly using the Templot slip functions, it will choose the slip switch rather than an REA or any other switch, which doesn't stop you replacing it with that. If you pull up the slip switch as the control template, for instance, pick that out of the slip complex and make that the control, you can then go into your real switch menu and choose whichever switch you like. So quite often when you're doing bespoke slips, you might, particularly irregular slips, which don't have a uniform curve through the slip road, you might well find that you need a different length switch at one end than you do at the other.
Okay.
Right, I'm going to make this a turnout. The switch unit here is this part. That's what is altered as part of the switch. I can change that into whichever switch I want. And if I come down to the slip switch, what's that? It's a C10, so we'll make it a fairly big one. It loses the sleep ring to start with. but the geometry is different. And the switch, as is selected by the Templot slip programs, I suspect has done some rail omissions, like omitting one stock rail, for instance, has already done that for you. But that's a fairly short switch there. But you can interchange switches without a problem between points and slips, tandems. That can be useful to get the minimum radius above what you want. Okay, so we've dealt with regular slips, which are slips which have regular type crossings, not curviforms, and more importantly have the K crossing and the V crossing of the same angle. But quite often, of course, we might want to make a slip or a diamond, come to that, where one or both tracks are curved and the K and V crossing angles are different. And that upsets the automatic slip making functions of Templot. But fear not, because we can still do it. Now, you don't need the information panels to tell you that when you convert that into a diamond, you're going to have different V angles. The K angle obviously is going to be the same on each side. But if we wanted to make a diamond or a slip, say, at the intersection of those two roads, then we are in irregular territory. And this is where there's a do-it-yourself element. Now, you can make an irregular slip completely by hand, but I think there are considerable advantages in still using the make slip function, although this will only make a regular slip with all the angles the same. The advantage of doing it this way is that the make slip function creates all the elements of the slip that you will need, but it's a bit Morecambe and Wise. It creates all the elements, but not in the right places. So once you've made the regular slip, you then have to adjust the K and V angles, and you also have to relocate the slip switches and remake the slip roads. But that is still the best option, in my view, to get an accurate irregular slip. How you create the diamond to start with will depend on the geometry of the intersecting tracks. If they are straight and or curved to a constant radius, then you can use the peg and align function, which simplifies things. However, if one or more tracks is on a transition curve, then the peg and align doesn't work and you have to use a different technique. We'll start with the simpler situation with one straight road and one constant radius road intersecting where we want to build the slip. Here is the plan. The first step is to use the peg and align tools to create the starter diamond. Then use one half of this to create a regular slip using the make slip function. This will keep the tracks on the main line all aligned. It will keep the V angle at the half diamond you're starting off with, the same V angle, but then it will correct the K angle to the same as that V angle and this V angle to the same. So it progressively pulls it away from the alignment you want. And then it's a question of pulling it back into the irregular geometry. Now we need a template for doing that, so we leave the original tracks stored in the background as the guide. The switches and slip roads are all out of kilter too, and there's a process for repositioning and remaking those. So there are quite a few steps, but that's what we're going to do. So the first thing I'm going to do is to save these baseline tracks, then copy to the control the one we define as the branch track, because I want one copy that is without sleepering. So we'll get rid of the timbering on that. And we'll save that. So I know we've got two copies over there, one without timbers. Now we'll make the diamond, which will get us started with the right geometry. So we'll make that the main road, so that becomes the control. Highlight the other road, peg on a line, make diamond. Now you've got two intersections, possibly, one where you can see it and one where you've got the mirror image about 2 feet to the left here. It's picked the right one, so we say, yes, please, carry on there. Make diamond crossing at notch. And I leave the background templates unchanged. The irregular diamond is base camp as far as making an irregular slip is concerned. So before we go to the next stage, let's just rehearse how we get to here when one or both roads are transition curves and we cannot use the peg and align tool. It might not be very prototypical to put a slip on transition curves such as these, but it might well be something we want to do on the model. So we'll go ahead and do this next. These are the two plain roads that will make the slip. They have different radii and both are transitional along their whole lengths, just to prove that it can be done with this geometry. I want to keep those as templates to make sure that the slip aligns with them. So they will stay in the background, the sleepers will get in the way. So in turn, I'm going to delete to the control and remove the timbering. That's real, timbering, no timbering, and we'll save that. And I'm going to do the same with the other one. No timbering. And save that. And we'll just check that they're both in the storage box, and they are. So we want to try to keep those there. So rather than delete to the control to start manipulating things here, we will copy to the control, which will save the background template. The plan is to convert this plain track template into a half diamond, which Templot allows us to do, even though it's a transition curve, and then bring that half diamond down to align it, superimpose it exactly over these two tracks, and record those angles. Then use that half diamond to make a full diamond and record the angles on the other one, and we'll use that as the basis for the slip. So the first step then is to add in a half diamond on plain track. Now I'm just happier working on the left side, so we'll make this the first half diamond, which means I want to switch that from facing to trailing. And now the function to use to swing this half diamond along the line of the transition curve is snake. So action, mouse action geometry, snake through peg. And I'll get it roughly in place. As this is the most important part of the alignment to get exact, I'm going to make good use of the zoom. I think that will probably do. So now you can see here that this is one rail of the main road. Here's the other rail of the main road. These are the branch roads. And this is the exact point of the middle of the K crossing for that half diamond, and it needs to be superimposed exactly on the crossing of the track center lines. So we're not far off, are we? So we need to come back into the snake function, and we'll just bring that back so that is exact. About there should do it. Now we can come out a little bit. Now our next jobs are to pull the K angle and the V angle into alignment with the underlying tracks that are acting as our templates. So we'll do the K angle first, and you can see how these two roads are diverging. So we do this by mouse action, reel now, adjust K crossing angle, wrong way, and we'll bring that back. And what we're trying to do is to align the track center line and the rails at the zone immediately adjacent to the K crossing, or where the K crossing will be. So I'm actually going to zoom this a step as well. Now we'll come back into the mouse action function again, adjusting the K crossing. Oscillate it back and forth until you get the best fit, and that is not a bad fit there and there and there on the center line, so we'll accept that. Now we'll swing along to the V angle, and we need to do the same with the V angle. Okay, we're not far out here, look, are we? Now, when I'm doing this, I prefer, this is one of the few occasions when I prefer to use a generic V crossing. And that is because the longer you have the tail of the branch coming beyond the crossing, the more it's likely to diverge from the varying radius of the transition curve. So if we use a generic crossing, we're altering the geometry up to the fine point marked by this cross line here. And then we can reduce the length of the turnout road right down to the V. So action, reel, V crossing this time. Let's move that box out of the way until that is exactly superimposed. And again, that's not bad there through the crossing. These are the roads we're aligning. So we can stop there. Now we'll just come back and check that that hasn't distorted the K crossing too much. Sometimes you can just end up with a bit of a bow on it. It has diverged a little bit there, hasn't it? Should we just see if we can improve that? And we can look, we can get the track center lines imposed for a much further distance there. And we'll just come back and do a final titivation with the V crossing. There. And that's pretty good. I think the only deviations we've got there is just due to the limitations of the pixels on the screen. So now we have that diamond properly aligned. We can now put some timbers on that. This is just a convenient time to do that. Equalized half diamond is the only option it gives you. And we can now use this half diamond, come out of it so we can see what we're doing, to make a full diamond. Okay, so now it's tools, make diamond crossing. And this is saying, do we want to continue with generic V crossings? This is something that the make diamond crossing function will allow you to do, but the slip won't. The slip will only make a full slip by reverting to regular crossings. So we say, yes, we don't really want to see that again. And there we are. And as luck would have it, we're not far out at all, are we? The K crossings obviously are going to be identical, otherwise you would have a kink at the middle of the crossing, which we don't want. And you can see that the branch road isn't quite aligned, but actually it's not far off. We will get it precise though, because if we then were to build track out from this diamond, it would get progressively further away from where we want it to be, which is this background template here. So action, real, V crossing angle, and we won't need to push it far. And we are back there, and we can stop there. So that's the second way to create an irregular diamond. And if you want to just stick with one sequence, then this is the one to use because it works for all geometries. So from now on, our progress towards making an irregular slip is the same for both ways of creating the diamond. What I want to do now, which you won't see, is I'm going to record the K and the V angles of these two half diamonds. This half diamond is still the control template, so we can come down to the information box and we can see that the K crossing is a 10.01 and the V crossing is an 11.4. And we'll save that. Now we'll need to come into the box here to pick up the other half diamond. And we can just bring up the information panel here, which comes behind the other box, of course. And we can see the K crossing is the same, which it should be, and the V crossing is an 8.91. So I've now made a note of those, which means that when we come to do the slip diamonds later, I can simply enter those dimensions and I don't have to use mouse action to do all the alignment again. It's 6 2/3 really. At some stage, you have to use the mouse action to superimpose the half diamonds onto the alignment you want. And you can either do that to start with a simple diamond, or you can do it at the stage of the slips. There's some advantage in doing it at the diamond stage, simply because you don't have as many tracks getting in the way and obscuring what you're doing. So there we have the diamond that we want. But what I am going to do is to get rid of this half diamond on the right, because you only need one half diamond to make a slip using the make slip function. So that's that half diamond. So I'm going to delete that. So now we're back to the single half diamond. So we'll highlight that half diamond as the control. And we'll delete that to the control. Now, what's the V crossing? Yeah, so that is a generic V crossing there. So now we can come into Tools and the Make Slip function. Again, we'll just make a single slip. And it gives us the option of not doing it or converting to regular and continuing. So we'll make use of this function. And it says a sharp transition zone. Slip roads created may not align perfectly to the slip switches. Right, and it says you can do it manually by creating the slip roads. Whether that's the way I have developed to do it, I'm not sure, but we will make it anyway and go ahead from there. And we'll continue. Right, so it will have made that slip all to the same angles, the two V-angles and the two K-angles of the two half diamonds in the slip will all be the same angle, and they'll be the angle of the V crossing of the starter half diamond. So if we now highlight the slip half diamond, we can see that it's kept the V angle to the 8.91 that was the original half diamond, and it's converted the K angle to that as well. So the first job here is to make the K angle, the 10.01 that we found it needed to be to match the intersection of the background tracks. So now we can do it simply by feeding in the numbers. So that'll be absolutely precise. K crossing options, K crossing angle. That wants to be 10.01. 10.01. Enter. And that has almost magically superimposed the whole thing. So now we can save that. And we want to do the same, more or less, with the other half diamond. And we can see here that both angles will need to be changed here. We'll do the K angle again first. 10.01. See that's the V angle 8.91. You can see how far this has come off now. So if we insert there the V angle of 11.4, which that intersection is, and we learned that when we did the diamond earlier, if we feed that figure in, we now have them exactly superimposed. So that's sorted out the half diamond part of the slip. Now we need to do something with the switches and the slip roads. And we're not going to use the slip road that's there. So we'll get rid of that because it will make it easier to see what we're doing. Slip road, delete. And we will highlight the left switch, which is there. And this is where, again, it starts to get a bit touchy-feely. It might be helpful just to run through the process of recreating the slip road itself. The switches have become out of position relative to the stock and crossing rails when we corrected the K and V crossing angles. So we need to shift and rotate them back to where they should be, the correct distance from the knuckle and nestling against the stock rail. Then we need to extend them using another of the make slip functions to create a new half slip road. We need to do all that at both ends of the slip road, i.e. for both switches, and then complete the slip road by curving the two half slip roads that we've created to form a tangent. Now, if you look at the switch, which is the control template, you can see that the peg, the red circle, is at the end of the planing. Now, for all of the manipulations that I've just been talking about, we need the datum of that switch to be at the tip of the switch blades. This position is coded as TP in the menu list of options for placing the peg under the geometry heading. It's one of the few options that I actually remember. I guess the TP stands for toe of point. So the first thing to do is to put the peg right at the toe of the switch blades. So that's geometry, peg positions, TP. Now we need to bring that point onto the center line at the point where we want the switch toes to start, which needs to be far enough away from the knuckle so that when the switch blade is open, there is room between the running rails to allow for the flangeway and the connections to the tie bar, which would be the connections to the stretcher bar in the prototype. We come 1, 2, 3 sleepers down. We want it to come about here. So shift and join, but before I start moving it, I'll hold down the shift key because I don't want it to click onto something that's nearby that it shouldn't. The tip of the switch blades should be just short of the edge of the sleeper so that they are well supported. That's there. Now, if we have a look at the end of the switch, the white cross lines here indicate the end of the planing. We can see that we're not quite rotated correctly. This is the outer face of the rail at the end of the planing just here. This wants to be aligned with the inner running face of this rail, so we just need to rotate it a fraction. So there. Now, while it's still the control, we can use this other make slip function in tools, which is make slip road from switch. There we are. And just for clarity, I'm going to curve that out of the way. And we'll make that the minimum radius curve, which I work to an absolute minimum radius of 30 inches, which is about 760 or so, is it? 762 there, and we'll save that. Now we need to do the same with the other switch. So we come into the box, show box list, slip switch, which is going to be this one, I think. Delete to the control. Same procedure. Geometry, peg onto the tip of the switch blades. Now we want to zoom in a little bit. 1, 2, 3, probably this sleeper. So we want to shift and join. So I'm holding down the shift so it doesn't snap where I don't want it to. And we will bring this along to, let's say, there. And how are we doing rotation wise? Same sort of problem, almost, but not quite. So we'll just rotate that one round. There. Stop. And we'll come out just to see the effect of this. Now that's still the control, that switch. So we come back into tools, make slip, and make slip road from switch again. And now we'll just see how we can get on making a tangent here. So we'll just lengthen that, and we'll start by curving this one up. Now we've got something to play with here because, look, we're at a radius here, which is 2.5 meters. So that's about 8 feet. So we don't need to be on the minimum radius for the other one. So this is all just how you feel you want to do it. We could actually increase the length of the switch here if we wanted to. We'll save that one. We'll come back into the box list. We'll pick up the other plane track, which is what it calls the slip road, and we'll make that the control. And we'll increase the radius of this to find a tangent with the other one. So it's about there. And you can see that the midpoint of the overlapping tangent is somewhere about here. So I'm going to mark that on my screen with my finger so I know how far to pull back the length of that. Say to there, save that. Now do the same with the other one. There. Had we made a double slip here, then we would simply have repeated what we've done to put these slip switches in the right place and create the slip road between them. We would simply have repeated that on the other side as well. Now we can have a look at the position of the toes of the switch, and we're clear of the check rail there. We're clear of the check rail there. The sleep ring is fine within the switch. So what we can do now is reconstitute the rails on each side. So if we highlight that one and actually copy that to the control, we want to put the peg at the other end because we are going to shorten this one up to the end of the slip. There, and we'll save that. We'll do the same with this one here. Copy to the control. We can leave that peg at that end and we'll shorten this one to that end of the slip. There, we might as well reinstate the sleep ring while we're here. It'll save a couple of clicks and square onto main road. And we can save that. You see why we copied it now, because we need to do the same with the other end. So we'll highlight this, bring this to the control. But now we need the peg at this end because we're going to reverse the shortening. Length. Reinstate the sleep ring there, reel, timbering. We'll make it square on and we'll save that. That's the half diamond. Is there anything else we need to do to get rid of unwanted templates? Right, we still have a plain track that's there. So in fact, I think we don't need that one at all. We can delete that one because this length of what looks like plain track is actually part of the original road that made the diamond. So we'll just run through and check. So we have one half diamond, another half diamond, one switch, another switch. That's part of the slip road. That's part of the slip road. And these are the approach tracks to it. There we go. So we've got everything we need and nothing more. We need to reinstate the sleep ring on this one. And the last thing to do is to see how the sleep ring all marries up. We've got some overlap of sleep ring here. So we'll just delete that to the control. And hopefully we can do this by rolling sleepers, which is under the mouse action reel menu, roll rails and sleepers. And we'll try and bring that down. Right, it's not going to go, because what we need to do actually is to get rid of this sleeper. So we're going to have to do it by shove timbers. So that's reel, shove timbers. We highlight this one, omit, hide. All the others are interlapping quite nicely. We can actually reduce that length slightly by rolling them a bit now. Sorry, reel, roll rails and sleepers. So just bring them up to, say, there. We can save that. So we are good on that side. How are we on this side? Okay, so we want to highlight this one. We'll roll these as close as we can to the half diamond timbers. And it's not going to do that. I think the easiest way to do this is going to be to snake, which will bring the whole lot down to there. We can stop that and save that. I was forgetting this is tied in with the diamond. I've not been very slick here. We'll delete this to the control, and we will split exit if it'll allow us to do that, which it does. Now we'll see if we can roll the sleepers. If not, we'll shove them again. There we go, that's better. So, like so. And there we have a properly made prototypical single slip on 2 transition curves with all the sleep rings sorted. We haven't had to alter the check rails. The only thing that I would just point out is that if you remember, the K crossing angle is 10.1. And so it has defaulted quite properly to a switched diamond, where the point rails in the diamond are planed to match the stock rails and come right up to rest against them, just like a switch rail. So there is no need for the check rails on the inside of the K crossing. Had we been working at a sharper angle, in fact, a 1 in 8 or anything less than that, then it would have defaulted to a checked K crossing, not a switch one. From the modelling point of view, we can actually force this to be a checked K crossing. If we come into the storage box and highlight that slip half diamond, and come into the K crossing options, fixed K crossings, fixed diamond, we can force it into a checked diamond. In any K crossing shallower than 1 in 8, which of course includes the example here, which is 1 in 10, there's a high risk of hitting the point of these rails here and derailing, because it's too shallow to check the flanges properly. But if you wanted to try it, then you could. Let's make them symmetrical, shall we? Likewise, if you have a checked K crossing that you want to force into a switched diamond, then you can do the reverse as well. K crossing options, movable K-crossing switch diamond. And we'll go back to that because that's what it should be. I'm sorry, but somewhere along the line I've managed to save an additional copy of the checked right half diamond. Real K-crossing options, movable K-crossing, save. With the sequence of steps we've just been through, you can make a slip to almost any geometry you need. The only situation I can think of where you might not be able to complete the slip road is where you're pushing the minimum radius with the angles at the intersection, so that you can't quite get the right switches or bring the two slip roads into a true tangent. In that situation, you are in pure hand building territory for the slip switches and slip roads. You also may not fancy doing all the manipulations to get the prototype geometry into your slips and switches, and there is a shortcut way of doing this by hand, which will give you a perfectly functional slip in a model, but will not be accurately to prototype geometry. So we'll explore now a little bit about the hand building ways of doing both of these options, and we'll start with the shortcut. We'll use the same starting point for this, that is the irregular diamond formed piecemeal as before on two transition curves. It's a cheat, but the simplest way to bring in a slip road would be to highlight the diamond on the left, say, I want to copy that to the control because I don't want to lose the half diamonds that's there. So we'll copy that to the control. We convert it to plane track, and the track that it will choose to make the plane track is the one we defined to start with as the main road, which is this one. Now, this is going to become the slip road. So I don't want to confound it with sleepers, so we'll remove the timbering again, and we'll just come out to see where the peg is, because I want the peg on the other end. Because what I'm going to do is to slide this along, snake it through the peg, which is straight, because that's the extension up to the start of the transition curve, and then it starts the transition curve. So it'll follow that alignment of that transition curve template. And I'm going to bring its start point up to where the toe of the switch would be. But first, I need to put the peg at the other end, like so. Now I can come back into action, mouse actions, and we'll use the snake function again, because that will then follow it along the line of this template, even following the transition curve. That's about right. And again, we'll need to zoom in to get it more accurate. That will do. You can see here is the start of it. And I want it to be far enough away from the knuckle so that there's room to open the switch without fouling the flangeways, and also to give room for the stretcher bar attachment. So I'm going to go for this sleeper here. Now you can see why it's worth having the sleepers in at this stage, because you want to have the tip of the switch just short of one sleeper so that it's largely supported by a sleeper at the end of the planing. So back to mouse action, snake through peg, and we'll bring it back to there. Stop that. The job now is to curve this rail so that it forms a tangent with this road and thus forms the alignment for the slip road. Now to do that, I'm going to need to bring the peg to this point here. So with a bit of luck, we can do that by using one of these there. Now we want this, remember, is a transition curve. So we can make that a constant radius. And now we can change its curve and swing it down and see where we are with regards to making a tangent somewhere along here. And we're not far off, are we? I reckon the middle of the tangent is going to be about here, which is perhaps a little far away from the knuckle. You want them roughly symmetrical, don't we? Be nice. So we could do with a shallower curve. To do that, we would need to rotate here. And by playing with the rotate and curve functions on the slip road, you can obviously make it straighter or more curved and angle it so that it lies symmetrically between the two crossings. As I said, this is a quick fix. We've not used prototypical switches or geometry, but it may be enough to build a perfectly functional and well-looking slip road. You'd obviously have to extend the length of the sleepers to cover the slip road, and its final alignment would inevitably have to be done by eye as you're constructing the slip. One thing that springs to mind just looking at it is the very long switches and the proximity of the slip road to the rails of the K crossing. You would need to flatten the slip road quite a bit to get enough clearance for the flangeways at the heels of the switches. But I hope this has taken it far enough just to show you the principles of this idea. However, we can get a lot closer to the prototype starting from this point, much closer to prototype switch and slip road geometry. But I should warn you, it does involve quite a bit of messing around. If we look, we can actually work out roughly what switch we've generated here, because we haven't actually used any of the template switches in Templot, but you can see from where the faces of the rail cross here and the length between that and the toe, you can work out roughly what that switch is, and that's a pretty long switch, isn't it? If we expand this, then we can see where we are with the X. So the crossing point there, X is at 178 millimeters. The toe is at 140, so that's 38 millimeters. That would make this something equivalent to an F switch. If we wanted to make this a D switch, say, the straight planed length of that switch would be 11 feet, which is 22 millimeters in 2 millimeter scale. So look at the X readings here. At the tip of the switch, we're at 140 millimeters along the grid. We want to be 162 then, which will do about there. Right, now if we're doing an REA switch, we would want the planing to be straight. So let's revert this slip road to straight, and the easiest way to do that is to come back into geometry and hit straight. Now we want to rotate it so that the faces of the rail intersect 22 millimeters beyond here, so that's 162. We're watching the information box at the bottom, so about here. Now I'm marking that with my finger, because I'm going to rotate the whole template now to try and bring that about. There. So that's the equivalent of a D switch there. And we can stop that. Right, so what I'm going to do now is to save that. I'm going to use the underlying template here to copy to the control again, because I want to manipulate this one too. And again, we want the peg at this end, because I'm going to do something similar here. The reason I'm using this background template is because this is the branch track. And so I cannot use the half diamond as the basis for this. I have to use the underlying template, which the half diamond is superimposed upon. So again, we can snake this along. Zoom in to see what we're doing. And again, we want to adjust this. This is going to be the tip of the switch blades. So we want enough space to be able to open with the stretcher bar attachments. Let's be symmetrical. Where did we have the other one? How many sleepers worth down from the knuckle? There's the knuckle. 1, 2, on the third sleeper down from the knuckle. So there's the knuckle. 1, 2, third sleeper down. So we'll make it on this sleeper. So we've not far to go. We'll just snake that back to there. Now we will bring the peg to the tip of the switch blades here. We'll make this straight again, because we want straight planing. And again, we'll calculate 22 millimeters so that this is a D switch as well, and see how the radii then match up. So the X point here is 292 there. So we want to be 270 for the intersection of the running faces here when we rotate this one out, which is here. And again, I'm going to mark that with my finger, and I'm going to rotate this template there. So you can see that would be the end of the planing there, where the switch rail has attained its full thickness again. And we can save that. So what we have now are 2 switches, and what we can do now is highlight them, which we'll do through the box. Go back to the left one first, and we can now delete this to the control template, reduce its length so it comes right back to being just longer than the length of the planing. There we go. And you can see where that is going to there. We can stop that and save that, and we'll do the same with the other one. Delete that to the control. Right. We'll zoom out so we don't spend so long reducing its length. Now we can zoom in to get that more precise. And again, we've gone too far, look. So we want that to be just beyond the length of the planing. So now we've manufactured two switches, not quite as neatly as Templot would because we've got overlapping stock rails basically, but we've manufactured 2D switches. The reason I've done it like that is because from modeling terms, you can make those switches however long or however short you want. We could just have imported a D switch there and aligned it and rotated it correctly against the diamond rails, but you can make your own like that. Now let's have a new template, plain track. And now what we'll try and do is shift and join it onto the end of the switch like so, which it's done with a snap. Now we don't want any timbering on that. And we'll curve it and see how we're doing and see if we can align it with the other one. And I think we're not going to be far off there, which is happenstance, I have to say. We can see that we've got a 3.5 meter radius there, so well within our minimum radius, which is something you need to keep an eye on. I'm actually going to save that, and I'm going to do the same the other way, because the most precise way to do this is to do it from both ends and adjust the curving of each until you get a tangent. So now we'll shift and join this in the same way as well. Get rid of the timbering. So we can't really go any further up with that one. And we'll see how the last one that we did there. So we can bring the curving back there and see if we can find a tangent. And hey presto, we have. And you can tell it's a tangent because the control template, which is coming from the left switch, is below the rail from the right one there, overlaps it, and then comes below again. So we have a tangent roughly about there. And I'm going to mark that with my finger. We now can come into length. We can reduce the length of this one to the midpoint of the tangent. Save that. Come into the box, pick up the other plane track. Delete that to the control. Reduce that length. To match. And there you have completely manufactured a slip. We're fortunate in that the switch blade toes are short of the check rails. We could have shortened the check rails had we needed to at both ends. There's the end of the switch on the left, just short of the check. Here's the end of the switch on the right, short of the check. The only thing you would need to do by hand here is to increase the length of these sleepers so you had the same length outside of the slip road in the middle here as you have down here at the crossing. So there you have it. Different ways in which you can manufacture a diamond or a slip when Templot doesn't really want to use its intrinsic functions to do exactly what you want. And I hope in all of those different elements that we've demonstrated in this now rather long session, for which my apologies, there might be some that you can use there to get the track that you want.